Hey everyone, welcome back to another Excel Better video, and here I wanted to cover some of the top shortcuts that I use in my day-to-day job as a financial analyst. And so these are in no particular order, but a lot of these things have been able to save me a lot of time, and they've been valuable to me. I wanted to pass them along to you. I also understand that there are a ton of shortcuts in Excel, so this is by no means an exhaustive list. If you have anything that you think is in your top 10, top 11 that I've missed on this, go ahead and let me know in the comments below, and I'd love to hear from you. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and get into my list. And the very first one I have here is for being able to add and remove a filter to data. So, being able to add and remove a filter. Now, if we come over here, the normal way, so this filter is already applied. The normal way to do this would be, kind of the default way would be from the ribbon to say sort and filter. You can click a filter here, come back here, click a filter, and you can add it. Now, that's not that tedious, of course, to do that. But, for me, if you actually use Control-Shift-L, it's just a quick keyboard shortcut to be able to add a filter to this or remove a filter. So you can see as I'm kind of, holding Control-Shift-L, it's adding and removing that filter. And, another big benefit from this is that if you actually have data that's already filtered, so in this case, if I filtered just to 4, I could use the Control-Shift-L to quickly clear my filter using this keyboard shortcut. So if I just did Control-Shift-L, it's going to clear the filter, Control-Shift-L again, it's going to be able to add that filter right back. So again, versus what would that look like in the other case? If we're here, you could come up here and say clear filter. Of course, then we're back to that. If we're here, you could come up here and from this menu say clear filter. So, that doesn't necessarily take that much time, but for me, just being able to do this can be quite valuable. And, another thing to keep in mind with filters, by the way, is that if you actually filter, if you just insert a filter by clicking into one cell, so if I'm clicked into E3 and I do Control-Shift-L, it's going to apply the filter up here. But if I toggle that back off, it's also something to keep in mind that if you actually wanted to be filtering this from a different point in the data set, you could actually just be highlighting just the range that you want filtered, then insert your filter, and it's actually going to treat these now as your column headers. Not saying that in this case that we actually want to be doing that, but it's something to keep in mind that can help you down the road. The second tip that I have, or shortcut that I have, would be for copying a tab within a workbook. And there's a really easy way to do that. And we literally, if we wanted to be able to copy this top shortcuts, you can literally just hold Control and left click on the tab. And after you left click it, you can drag this anywhere else within your workbook. And you can kind of see there's a little arrow that's kind of letting you know that if you let it go at any of these spots, that's where the tab is going to end up. So if we drag it all the way to the end here, we see the little arrow is at the end. So if I drop it, that's where the tab is going to be. It's going to say top shortcuts, and now in parentheses here, it's going to say 2, but we could just go ahead and call that whatever else we want to do. So you could rename the tab as you see fit. And what that can be nice to do is if you actually want to be able to just copy a tab real quick, a benefit from that could be, well, what if you just wanted to be able to test a new formula, but you don't want to break everything else or potentially screw up something else? You could just say, hey, I'm just going to copy that tab over, test it out real quick. If it works, great, I can roll forward with it. And if it doesn't, now I know that at least the other tab it's not corrupted in any way. Or if you have something, that is a similar format, like let's say you've got a timesheet and you create a timesheet for one employee and you want to be able to just recreate that for the next employee and the next employee, you could literally say, okay, I've got the format. I'm going to insert this now, change the employee's name within the tab that you just created, and keep that same structure. So that's a quick way to do that. And also keeping in mind, since we're talking about moving around tabs, that if you wanted to reorder any of these, you can actually just left click and hold, and you can move this anywhere else in the workbook that you want to. And another good thing to keep in mind with tabs, since we're on the topic, is that if we actually have a workbook with a ton of tabs, and I've seen a lot of tabs used in workbooks, so it can be a little cumbersome to be able to navigate between all of these, which you could do with this left and right arrow in the lower left-hand corner over here. But if you wanted to be able to just quickly see all the tabs that are available, because as you can see right now, we can't really see them all in one place, we could actually, where these arrows are in the lower left-hand corner, just right-click, and that's going to show you all of the tabs that are available, and you could just click on any one of these, and it's going to automatically bring you right back to that tab. So those are some shortcuts with being able to quickly create a copy of a tab, kind of reorder them, and then be able to view all of the available tabs within a workbook that you're working with. Number 3 is inserting a new line in the same cell that you're working on. That might not be immediately intuitive about what that means, but let me just go ahead and show you with this one. So if I drag down the formula bar, which is what this is right here, so if I drag this down, what if I wanted to, within the same cell, have underneath of this, I wanted to say 3A, or I wanted to, just have some other comment that's down here instead of just kind of continuing to wrap this way. If you wanted to do that, you can just go ahead and hit Alt and Enter, and then you could come over here and say A and type some stuff. So if you actually want to be able to have your note wrap down like that, you can just be able to enter a new line with Alt plus Enter. Now, number 4, we have jumping to the source cell. So again, if we have workbooks with a lot of different tabs and a lot of different formulas going on, we might have, like, let's say this is referencing sheet 7. Actually, let's put it in A1. Let's make it easy. So in here, we have this information, which, again, let's say that this is actually buried, or let's say that we have just a lot of formulas going on, a lot of tabs going on. If we wanted to really quickly be able to actually just get back to where this is coming from, and it'll bring us to the exact tab and to the exact row that it's coming from. So if we want to get back to this, we can go ahead and hit Control plus the bracket button that we see listed here. So our little bracket button, by the way, is kind of just above the Enter key on the keyboard. So if we do that, we're going to click into this cell, and I'm going to hit Control, and I'm going to hit that bracket symbol. And when I do that, it's going to bring me right to sheet 7. And it's going to bring me right to that cell that's driving that formula. So that can be really beneficial, just a quick time saver to say, okay, this is saying 8, but where's that coming from? Or let's just go to that tab, go to that row. You click into that, there you go, brings it to it. And I think one of the things that continues to shock me is number 5, which is just being able to kind of quickly highlight different data using the keyboard shortcuts. I feel like that's something that's really not as understood as what it could be, and it saves so much time. And what I mean by that is, if I'm currently in A5, because we're talking about the number 5 shortcut here, if I wanted to go all the way to the top, I could click the arrow key until I get there, or I could hold the arrow key down, I'm going to get there. But if I wanted to, I could hit Control and up arrow, and it's going to jump all the way there. If I wanted to go to the bottom of this data set, I could do Control and down arrow, and it's going to bring me there. And once again, which is true for a lot of these shortcuts, if you have something that's small like this, maybe that's really not that valuable, but if you have a bigger data set, and let's just make one up real quick here. So if we have a bigger data set like this, you might be scrolling through and thinking, hey, how many A's are there? And you could quickly just say Control down arrow, and it's going to bring you right to that last cell. So that can be a quick shortcut there. But what you can also do is you can highlight this whole, just that range that actually has continuous data. And you could do that by actually doing Control, Shift, and down arrow. If you do Control, Shift, down arrow, that's actually going to highlight that entire range. And you might find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, I highlighted the entire range, but I didn't actually want the last, row to be selected, or the last 10 rows, or whatever that case might be. You could actually hold Shift and hit the up arrow, and that's going to be able to back off as many cells as what you need to be backed off. So again, if you highlighted the whole thing and you're like, I don't want that last row because maybe the last row says end in it, or end report, or whatever the case might be. If you find out that you don't want that, you can just hold Shift, up arrow, and then now you're just selecting the data that you actually need to be selecting. Or you might find out that, I just did column A, but I actually need to be selecting, column A and B. So now you could actually, again, holding Shift, hit the right arrow key, and now that whole range is going to be selected if that's what you need to happen. So again, just being able to hold control and being able to jump around with the arrow keys, or being able to hold just shift in the arrow key, you can select data that way. So holding shift and using the arrow keys, or again, control shift, being able to highlight the whole range of data that you want to be highlighting. Being able to jump around using those shortcuts or being able to highlight data, I think is just really valuable. And again, I've encountered a lot of people seeing me navigate spreadsheets, and they had questions about how I was able to select data so quickly. And it's come up often enough that I thought, I just wanted to pass that along to make sure that everybody's aware that that's something you can be using. Another one that I use a lot, and it's extremely helpful, is if I'm going to be copying and pasting. So to not just do Control V, but to do Control Alt V. And this menu is just really powerful, and it offers just a lot more detail than how you can actually go about copying things. And so let's take a look about what that means. So if I was actually going to, let's say, hit Control C here, so if I'm going to copy A1, and if I wanted to just do a Control V down here, it's actually going to bring that formatting with it, right? But I might not necessarily want that to be the case. So if I did a Control C here, now I could right click and I could just go to values, and that's going to be able to bring over the cell that I had, bring over the contents, and it's not going to bring the formatting. But if I wanted to do the keyboard shortcut, I would do Control C, come down here, do Control Alt V, and then it's going to bring up this paste special menu. And again, still working within the keyboard, if I just did this, I could just hit V, which is going to bring me to values, hit enter, and that's going to be able to quickly allow me to copy that, just paste values, just using the keyboard shortcut. So once again, it could be Control C, Control Alt V, hit V again for values, hit OK, and now you've quickly just copied this down, and you have that as you want it to be done. Now, when you also do this though, you can realize that if you do the Control Alt V, there's more than just pasting values. If you decide that you want to paste formulas, you could do that, or you could hit F, and it's just automatically going to be able to do the formulas for you. You can do, again, values like we just did. If you only wanted to copy the format, you could, again, copy that format and be able to, come down here and hit this, and it's going to copy your format for you, which is kind of like a shortcut of being able to use the format painter. Because if we had, let's say we wanted just column A's format to be copied all the way down, we could hit the little paintbrush over here and accomplish it that way. But if I hit Control Z to undo, if I just copy this section, hit Control Alt V, formats, it's going to be able to do that exact same thing. It's going to take this formatting and apply it down here with a keyboard shortcut. Another thing you can do with the, this paste special menu that you get with Control Alt V, again, so much you can be doing with this. If you want to be able to copy the comments, so if there's a comment in A1 that says, revenue's down due to this customer, you want to copy that to another cell, you can copy just the comment. So you can do that. Let's see what else we can do here. I know another really big benefit is if you actually want to be able to paste and just quickly add in numbers or multiply numbers and things like that. And what that could be is, let's say you had a whole column of numbers and you put them in and you find out that, hey, this is actually should be a negative number. So if you wanted to actually convert these to negative, you could actually put, a -1 just anywhere else in your spreadsheet here, hit Control C, you could copy this and you could say values, multiply, and you're actually going to get a -1. And now I know you might be thinking in this case, you could say, well, of course, if it's 1 and you want it to be -1, you could have just said, you're going to highlight this and do values anyway. You don't need to do the -1. But, what if these were all -100 and you really wanted them to be positive? Right? So that's when this can kind of become a little bit more powerful. So again, Control C on this -1. If I really want these to all be positive, Control Alt V, multiply, and now you've changed the sign on all of these things. And you can also use the add button. So, by the way, like if you decided that, these values might all be different, which let's do that. Let's do rand between, let's say 10 and 100. So we've just generated some random numbers here. And if we said, your boss looks at these numbers and they say, we're going to add 10 arbitrarily to all of these numbers. And you're not sure why, but they're the boss. So you're like, you know what? They want 10 added. So we're going to do that. If you want to use this Control-Alt-V, you could copy this 10, highlight this range here, use our paste special Control-Alt-V, and click add. And since we're still copied from this 10, we're highlighting this range. And I like to just use values for this. We're doing add, you hit OK, and now it's actually taking each of those. And, it was 84, now it's 94, it was 52, now it's 62. So it's literally just taking all of those numbers and it's adding that constant that we wanted added to it. So there's a lot of value, a lot of flexibility for what you can be doing with Control-Alt-V. It's a really powerful shortcut. And if I was doing these in order, it might be a really good candidate to be the number one. But again, no particular order. Number 7 is the auto sum. So with the auto sum, you can go ahead and you can do this in a couple ways. Let's go to so I'm going to actually right click. I'll just do this and I can go to our example data. And if you want to be able to put in a sum formula, now you could of course just say equals sum and do that. So you can get your sum that way, but you could also just underneath of a column of numbers here, hit Alt equals, and that's automatically going to put that sum in for you. So again, you come over here, Alt equals, and there's your sum. Okay, so there's an easy way to do that. You could also find out that if you want information summed up to the right of this, that you could also use it in that way as well. You could say Alt equals to the right of your data. It's going to automatically put in that sum here, or it can automatically put in the sum at the bottom. So find myself using that a lot. It's an easy shortcut, and you just want a quick sum, Alt equals. There you go. For number 8, it's a quick shortcut to be able to just navigate between tabs. So if you want to be able to, just quickly, hold control, I could go ahead and hit page down in this example, and it's going to bring me to the next tab and to the next tab and the next tab. So you can cycle through all the way to the end by just holding down page. So it's going to quickly bring you there. So that's something that can come in handy. But again, you can kind of compare and contrast the value of doing that versus right clicking and looking here, and a lot of those things. Or if you find yourself having to, tab over or page over in a tab, to be able to, get a particular tab within a workbook, you might find out that, hey, I'm using this example data a lot, so maybe it's just going to be easier for me to just drag this over and have this at the front of my workbook, so I don't actually need to constantly be going over. But if you do find yourself needing to be able to navigate between tabs, your shortcut is just Control, page up and down. Now, inserting a new workbook, again, I think inserting a new workbook is a nice shortcut for me because there's a lot of times where if I'm actually working in a project, I might be curious to say, well, okay, but I don't want to corrupt this workbook, but maybe I want to copy my example data, and I can go ahead and hit Control New and paste this into a new workbook and just experiment with this real quick and say, or maybe I want to remove duplicates on something, or just in some way other than the workbook I'm using. Maybe I just want a quick and dirty way to be able to just validate something, test something in a way that I'm confident that I'm not messing up this standard workbook that I'm using. That can be a way to do it. Or of course, if you just find yourself needing to truly just use a new workbook, hitting Control N, whatever purpose you have for doing that, quick and easy way, new workbook, Control N. Number 10 is being able to paste in the same value in multiple cells. I think there can be a lot of value in that. So if we want to be able to do that, and I think I actually showed you in another one here. So yeah, when I was putting in, A all the way down to show you the example of how we could use our control and our up and down arrows to kind of navigate through this, what I did is you can highlight a section, type whatever you want. So you can type the letter A, it could be whatever you want. And, while you're still, clicked into this, you could say Control Enter, and it's going to autofill that whole thing. You know, we could also say, if we highlight this range and we want to just say test, again, before I hit enter, I'm going to say control enter, and it's actually going to put test in this whole section. So if you want to be able to just quickly, you know, highlight a range and populate, you know, an entire thing here, we can go ahead and do that. And of course, this can also be done with formulas. And I did this in another case earlier, where if you wanted this to just contain random numbers, you could say rand between, pick your bottom, pick your top. And if you hit control enter, it's going to enter random numbers in this whole section. So that's kind of how you can quickly either autofill text or autofill formulas into one entire section. Number 11 is going to be calculating part of a formula within the formula bar. And this is really valuable to me to be able to troubleshoot what's going wrong. Because sometimes if you have a complicated formula, you might be getting a reference error or an NA as your output. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every component of the formula is wrong. It could just be one small piece. So let's go ahead and walk through an example of what that would look like. So if we have, you know, a formula over here that says this formula is giving you an output of 320, but let's say it's D1 times 3 plus D1 times 5. Now, if you wanted to know what either one of those sections is, you could actually highlight the D1 times 3 and then just hit F9, and it's actually going to show you what that result is. And if you hit enter, it'll actually keep that as a constant, so you've got to be careful. So when you're actually in here doing this, you know, for me, if I'm just trying to understand what that output would be here, I would hit F9 and I would say, okay, this would calculate at 120. Then you can hit escape and you could go to the next section and say, okay, what would this one equal? Okay, this one equals 200. So you can see that. And again, in this particular case, you know, there's maybe not a lot of value to be able to actually calculate these independently. Let's try to break this here. So if we said we have these components, but then we're also going to add a VLOOKUP for, you know, the contents of B1 in this table array and just making some stuff up here. You know, this is a case now where we have the output of our formula as an NA. So this formula isn't working, but again, you could be looking at this and you could be saying, okay, you know, does this section work? You know, so you could say, okay, yep, that calculates at 120. This calculates to 200. So you're like, okay, I'm getting values. Those are good. How's the VLOOKUP working in this case? Oh, this one's calculating as an NA. So without having to like kind of copy these out individually and say, you know, does this VLOOKUP work? So we could copy that, by the way, and then just come over here and say equals VLOOKUP and say, okay, we know this isn't working, but being able to just highlight sections and kind of calculate this bit by bit can be a good way to just, you know, quickly find out what's tripping you up in your formula. And hopefully it's just one thing and not everything that's wrong. Okay, those have been some of the top shortcuts that I use on a day-to-day basis. Again, a lot of these have been able to save me a lot of time. They make my life a lot easier. I would love to hear from you. If you have any shortcuts that you're using in Excel that I haven't covered, go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know if this video was useful to you, or if you are interested in receiving future videos from Excel Better. Go ahead and hit subscribe and hit the notification button, and you'll be aware of all the new content that I'm sending out for you guys. So thanks for watching.